Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, laughing in the face of motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy. And today we're talking to Jo Piazza. She is a best-selling author, a podcast creator, and an award-winning journalist. She is the author of the new thriller we're going to talk about today. I have it right here, The Sicilian Inheritance, as well as 5 other books, 4 of which have been optioned for film and television. Jo is also a podcaster, and her podcasts have garnered more than 25 million downloads. They regularly top the podcast charts. Jo lives in Philadelphia with her husband, Nick, and 3 feral children. Welcome, Jo.
Thanks for having me. I love any break from my 3 feral children, so this is truly excellent.
And we love any mom who describes their children as feral, so it's warm water all around here.
I mean, why not be honest about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, so many author bios are like, just lives with their adorable family, and I'm like, oh my God, I mean, just gag me with a spoon.
Yes.
Like, I love my kids, and they're insane.
Yes, both can be true, and we will be talking about that quite a bit when we get to your podcast, Under the Influence, and the role of social media influencers. But we do want to start with the Sicilian Inheritance.
Yes.
Amy, lead us in.
I just finished this book last week,
Oh,
The Sicilian
yay.
Inheritance. My mother-in-law just picked it for her book club, and I'll tell you why. Because my mother-in-law's grandfather was born in Caltabolota, the exact same small town where your ancestors came from. I think we're cousins. I think
we're definitly related. This is insane.
Definitely related. I have been able to find out. I've already tracked this with her. I've got a little ancestry.com.
This is now a genealogy podcast.
This is a genealogy
record,
podcast.
Guys, if you were looking for parenting, you're in the wrong place.
You're in the wrong place. This is now a genealogy.
All genealogy all the time.
All the time. Yes.
So my husband's great-grandfather, his name was Giovanni Parlapiano, and he came in 1910 from Caltabolota to New York following his father, who had come in 1903. And I was like, oh my God, were they literally in the same ship?
God.
No, but they came like the same couple of years from the same town as
No,
your
but they could have
ancestors.
been. We had people coming in 1910. Some of her sons were coming in 1910. So Parlo Piano, I love that. It means it literally means I talk slow.
Right.
Yeah, I talk. Oh no, I talk soft.
I talk softly.
I talk
Yes.
softly. Yeah.
Well, talk soft.
As
I talk
happened-
softly.
It's like everybody's name who's like Miller's son. It's like, go get the Miller's son.
Get
to
the
do
Miller's
that
son.
for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Right. And he changed his name to John Parlo almost as soon as he
Mhm.
emigrated to the United States, as people were wont to do then. But he ended up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where your ancestors also ended up. And this is the crazy part about everybody, having ancestors who emigrated from other places. I have had this conversation over again. Like, my ancestors are from Caltabolota with people who are from Scranton. Turns out all of our ancestors are from Caltabolota. But I think there was this collective, like, we're in Pennsylvania now, we don't talk about it. And now,
Right. Yeah.
2-3 generations later, we're like all about it. So I've been to Caltabolota.
Oh
I've walked
my God.
the things you talk about in this book, the areas, the dragon's ear that you whisper in. Like, I'm like, I know exactly where that is. I have a picture of it. It was so exciting to read this book and re-engage. And my final point is, my mother-in-law thinks that your uncle sat next to my father-in-law, Eddie, in grade school at Mother Cabrini.
Oh,
She's like,
probably.
Piazza. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Piazza. He sat right next to Poppy at Mother Cabrini. So.
Oh my gosh, probably. This is insane. I'm so glad that I didn't know this before we got on air, because I'm just like, I'm speechless. This is the craziest thing ever, because it's such a tiny village. It is a tiny, tiny village, on top of a rock, on top of a mountain. But you are also not the first person to tell me this. So I've zoomed into about 50 book clubs now since the book came out. And one woman popped up and she's just like, yeah, my grandfather's from Caltabolota. I'm like, of course he is, because Sicilians, we just find each other. And also they all went to Scranton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Scranton's a great place, and we're all over there.
Scranton, and they're all from there. Now, speaking from the audience point of view, who are jumping into this genealogy discussion,
Yes.
perhaps a little confused, let's back up a couple of steps. And for people who haven't read the book, Jo, tell us why we are having this discussion about Caltabolota.
Yes.
Sicily,
I love
correct?
the way you just said that. Caltabolota.
I know. Sorry. I'm
Yeah.
all Irish. If you want to talk about things that happen in Dingle, Cork, or Roscommon, I'm here for you,
Oh
but I
my
don't speak
gosh.
any Italian.
I hung out with that dingle dolphin once, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah. I did a whole story about it. I'm going to send it to
Everything
you.
cute happens in
Everything
Dingle.
cute happens in Dingle. So yeah, The Sicilian Inheritance, it's a thriller and partially historical fiction. It's set in both Sicily and Philadelphia, and it's loosely based on the true story of the murder of my great-great-grandmother, Lorenza Marsala. And I've known for my entire life that, she was killed before she came to America, but that's it. We didn't know anything else. My family has all these theories. One is that she was killed by the mafia for her land. The other is that she was killed because she was a witch or a healer. And that's the one that the women in my family like because they all believe that they're Sicilian witches. And I took that nugget of, what would it be like to be a woman left behind in Sicily? Because nearly 1 million men left Sicily and came to America, and the wives always came years and years later. And it was this strange feminist time in Sicilian history because the women took the men's jobs and they were buying and selling land and lending money. And it felt like a very powerful time for me. So I created this novel where a modern day woman, a chef in Philadelphia, goes back to Sicily to try to claim her family's inheritance. And she's set upon by the same nefarious forces that may have taken her own great-grandmother down, and she's trying to solve this murder mystery. So there's intrigue, there's also some spice, and I mean, really, most of all, I just wanted to write a delicious book. Like, I just wanted to make people hungry, and I want them to want to book a trip to Sicily.
Yeah, this is the one I beach read is sometimes used dismissively, but like get this one for the beach chair this summer.
Yeah,
It's like you're just in it. It's got that great historical fiction, and I am a historical fiction lover. And as a person who cannot pronounce Cota Bolote,
Cootie Baludi.
I still really liked it, even though I'm full Irish.
So Irish. Well, I do want to go back to Scranton for one hot second. I signed a book for Jill Biden this weekend.
Huge.
Yeah, we were both at an Italian American festival in Milwaukee on the main stage together on different nights. But we were both giving a talk. Jill is Sicilian, by the way, which I did not know. And I signed a book to her that said Sicily, Philly, Scranton, all the best things are in this book.
That's perfect.
It was pretty perfect. It was pretty perfect. Yeah. But Joe also went to grade school. Joe Biden went to grade school with my uncle as well. So, again, it all goes back to Scranton.
I had never thought about this. I feel so silly having looked into all this genealogy that the men left. The men went first to the United States to try to establish a new life and see if they could make it work. And the women were left behind for a decades, or forever sometimes.
Or forever.
Because
a lot of women did not want to come to America. In fact, one of the academics that I talked to when I was doing research found an entire treasure trove of letters from the women to the mayors of their towns saying, please tell our husbands we don't want to leave.
In the book, you have set up that the baker's wife becomes the baker after he leaves, and she's darn good at it. And the character that's loosely based on your great-grandmother becomes a healer, and she's very good at it when there's no doctor anymore. And these women start to take on these roles. And then, as always happens, there's a little bit of a pushback, right? Society's like, actually, women can't be bakers.
Society's
We're
like,
not so fast.
Yeah, we don't love this. We don't love it when women have power or ambition or money because, money gives us both power and ambition a lot of times. Yeah. Yeah. And, I was also really inspired to write this. I mean, I've thought about this story for a long time, but I didn't really get it on paper until after I had my daughter. So I've got an older boy, he's 7, my daughter's 4, and then my baby's 18 months. She's also a girl. And once I had my daughter, I just kept thinking about the stories that women pass down and the stories that we share. And it became even more important to me to write this book. And so I dedicated Sicilian Inheritance to both of my little girls, their wonderful wild animal selves.
How do you think that you have you changed? Has your outlook on life changed from doing the research in this book and realizing this is sort of part of who you are? It's part of your DNA?
Yeah, I mean, it really has. I've got to say, when I was at this Italian American festival this weekend, I feel so much more connected to being an Italian American than I have in a very, very long time. It was a big part of my dad's identity, but writing this book and like reconnecting with my roots, yeah, it's helped shape me. And also, this again, back to the stories we passed down about women, I knew, like, when I pictured Lorenza, my great great grandmother back in Sicily, like I pictured just like a nona. She's like in the house. She's cooking sauce, right? But she was so much more than that. And
Right.
I've gotten to explore her actual life. And she was, just an intense firecracker of a lady. She was buying and selling land and lending money on her own. She was alone for more than a decade. And yeah, I think that just makes me like feel stronger and braver as a woman. And I think that those stories, like, it's a shame to me that I didn't capture more of the stories of my older relatives before they passed, because I do
Right.
feel like a lot has been lost.
I want to click on that, especially for our audience. We're going to take a break. We're talking to Jo Piazza. She is the author of The Sicilian Inheritance, which is out now, and the host of the podcast Under the Influence. And we will be right back. I think we hear this theme a lot on the podcast: connection, roots, that people who maybe, I come from a big Irish family that does a lot of genealogy stuff and tracing. And there's a lot, every Irish person, I'm sure the people in Ireland are so tired of us showing up and being like, my cousin lived in this town. They're like, we know. Go
We
back
know.
to America.
We're aware.
bored of your
Yes.
faces.
We're so sick of
They're
you.
more aware than we are.
Yeah, they're like, get out of here,
Mhm.
basically. But I do think that this idea, when you have children, that like you are part of a line. I was at a wedding this weekend, and so much talk about these two kind of families and all of this history of survival kind of merging together. And there's something very beautiful about that. So, for people who are just intrigued by this idea of finding those connections for themselves, where did you start? Was it something that you were always interested in? Is it something that you start with like on an app? Like, how do you do this work?
It's such a great question, and it's something my dad was really obsessed with before he passed away about 7 years ago. So he got started with a lot of the genealogy research. And because people are so into this, honestly, I've also done another podcast called The Sicilian Inheritance, where it's me trying to solve the actual murder. Like, I finished the book. I didn't do any research into how she actually died. But then I was like, oh, now I've got to solve the murder in real life. And so
great. Now I've got to solve a
now
murder.
I got to solve a century-old murder. And so I created a true crime podcast where I go back to Sicily and solve the murder. And it traces exactly how I did it in real time. And I had her birthday. I started with the guys at Ellis Island, the historians there. They were so helpful. I personally find Ancestry.com very difficult to navigate. I don't
you
love
get
it.
lost in it.
You get lost in it. It's hard to save things. I just, like, for user experience, I like didn't have a great time with it. So I talked to the guys at Ellis Island, and they can find so many documents, not just the ship manifests.
And
but
when you say talk to the guys, is that something like you Google and
I Googled
connect with
historian at Ellis Island and I emailed them.
Okay.
And if you go, I'm a journalist, so it was a little bit easier. But if you go to Ellis Island, they have historians there who will help you, who you can
incredible.
say, I would love to do research on my family. What can you help me find? And so they did find the ship manifests for all of Lorenza's sons and her husband. And on those, they had to write who they left behind. And they left her. And so it had her birthday on it. And with the birthday, we were able to go back to the village and look up her birth record, which had an annotation that had her death date. And then in these so then we're in like the town hall, like the little comune in Caltabolota. Amy, I'm sure you've seen it. And we got they have the big book of death. It's like a 2-foot tall cloth bound book with handwritten entries of everyone who died. And it's divided into 2 sections, Section A and Section B. And Section A is for death by natural causes, and Section B is deaths by unnatural causes. And she was in Section B. And she was also there with a gentleman named Niccolo Martino, who was killed in the exact same location at the exact same time as she was. My family had never heard of Niccolo Martino. And with that moment, we were off to the races to try to figure out what happened. So it really has been a cobbling together of working with Ellis Island. I did work with Ancestry. They actually have an in-house genealogist who is a genealogy influencer. It was like a collision of all of my worlds.
Okay.
Named Krista Cowan, and she calls herself the barefoot genealogist. And so Krista has been helping me try to navigate Ancestry. And then I've just been like doing the reporting. I like have been trying to find these relatives from other branches of the family tree to find out what they know. And it's very interesting, you know, what stories which family members choose to keep. Like, you know, this murder became part of my family's lore, but not part of other branches of the family.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's just like excavating land, right? Like the first, I don't know, a couple of feet is easy, and then you hit, what's this? And then all of a sudden it gets a lot harder all of a sudden, and then it might be what you're looking for down there. But
yeah, exactly. Well, and then I petitioned for a year to get access to the homicide and mafia records in the courthouse in Shaka. And they finally gave it to me, but they're like, you have to get here right away. The records might be destroyed. And I'm like, really? They're 100 years old and they might be destroyed now?
The day?
Today's going to be the day. But I booked a plane ticket. And then my best friend was, you know, she has 3 girls, 13, 11, and 9. And she hasn't really taken a vacation solo without them. She's like, I'm going to come. I'm going to meet you in Palermo. And so we had a girls' vacation without our kids in March for about a week. And we dug through old dusty court records in Shaka. It was amazing.
And I will say for the record, you have a background in journalism. And so some of this work, like, you can do light genealogy. You don't have to start this and then solve a murder.
You don't have to solve a murder. You don't have to solve a murder. No.
You can figure out things without going quite as deep in as Jo did.
Oh, I mean, I'm so deep. Like, I wish I could show you my...
you could get back out,
I don't know how to get back out. And, you know, the Sicilian Inheritance podcast, I joke, it's like Only Murders in the Building meets White Lotus meets Bluey, because I took my 3 children with me to Sicily to start solving it. Mostly because I figured, you know, the cost of childcare is so high in America, and I could be battling them in Philadelphia to do the things, or I can battle them somewhere beautiful with delicious food.
I also feel like it's going to be huge for college essays. I went abroad and solved a murder with my mom.
My mom took me to Sicily to solve a family murder.
I mean,
and then wrote about it
even
for
if
the
they
Daily
don't
Mail.
want to go to college, that's still going to be an awesome podcast of their own.
I know. Well, you know, I do think a lot that my kids are pretty soft. Like they have it real easy in life. And they need something to talk to a therapist about. And I have given it to them.
It's mom took me to solve a murder.
Mom took me to Sicily to solve a murder.
Young child.
I was very small.
You talked about the dovetailing with your other career, which is as a podcaster. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Jo's podcast, Under the Influence. We'll be right back. On top of being an author, Jo is also a podcaster of several podcasts, but we're going to focus today on her new podcast with Adalist Media, Amy and my company, and it's called Under the Influence, and it offers a deep dive into social media. Jo, what made you want to talk about this as a podcaster? I love this podcast, as often with Adalist podcasts. I was a huge fan of this podcast, and I said, let's try to get her. And so it's really exciting.
And now you got me.
Have the podcast
now you got me. Yeah.
Adalist.
So when I had my daughter 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, she didn't sleep. I mean, she was colicky and just angry all night long. And so
born mad.
Yeah, born mad. And I mean, now she's also a lot of fun. I mean, she's the girl that's going to walk into a room, take off all her clothes and start singing karaoke and
party.
She's a party. She's a party in a box.
And
but
just to be clear, she's still quite young doing this. We're not talking about.
No, she's 4. She's 4.
I mean 4, but she's not 20. You know,
she's not 20.
Still
No,
young
no, 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 no,
enough
no.
to be pulling this off.
Watch
totally.
this space.
I mean, she can totally pull it off. And so because she didn't sleep, I didn't sleep, and I was like rocking her, and the only appendage I had free was my thumb, and so I'm scrolling my phone,
right,
like a lot of us do. And I was being served mom influencers constantly. You know, these women in these like white, clean linen dresses, trying to sell me or all sorts of organic baby stuff and like goat nipple pacifiers. And it almost broke my brain. And as a reporter, I was like, I just want to know more about this world. I just want to know, like, who are these people? Is this real? Are they making actual money? And so I was like, I'm just going to do 8 episodes of a narrative podcast about how influencing works. And now we're more than 130 episodes because social media has become media, and it is the main place where eyeballs are, and the influence is huge. And I do think that it needs to be covered the same way that we cover anything else that has power. And so we've branched out from mom influencers because what I've realized is there's an influencer for everything.
Sure.
Everything.
Just this morning, I had to mute somebody on Twitter who I was being served without asking for it. Like, here's what I've learned about losing weight. It's that you have to eat less and move more. I'm like stop. Like, I don't want this. First
I don't
of
want
all,
this.
meet a middle-aged woman's metabolism, dude. But like, why are you serving this to me? I didn't ask for it, and I'm being like served it at my eyeballs every time I open my phone. And there's some detritus, right? I can be like, block, I don't want to listen to that. But then there's like some little tiny, like, oh, I'm not doing it right.
I'm not doing it right.
I need
of
to
course,
do it right,
of course.
That I will carry around with me.
And I think that it's more dangerous too for new mothers. The first time that you become a mom, you think you're not doing anything right. And I think we're really vulnerable to this unsolicited advice, which most of it is not medically proven, often very unhelpful. I mean, there are influencers for breastfeeding, baby feeding, baby mobility influencers. It's actually insane. And they're making a lot of money. I mean, this is a $17 billion industry right now that's expected to double in the next 3 years. And so the goal with Under the Influence, I went from, doing 1 episode a week to I do about 2 or 3. And I have influencers on. We talk about breaking news in the influencer world. But, we also really just dissect what it means to be a woman in the world right now. What is it like to be a mom in the world right now? So we branch out into lots of other topics that I think just impact the way we live.
And you describe the podcast, you describe social media as a place haunted by aspirational marketing where it feels like every other person is a social media influencer trying to sell you something. And I think sometimes we all understand to a certain degree, oh, social media is fake. It's fake book. Oh, it's all. And I think that we have developed that in our own kind of lexicons that like social media is fake and people are fronting. But somehow that fronting still works on us. And I love the way you're able to discuss that in terms of like brands where you really do have to underline that this person who lives in a dress on a farm and like seems to just sprinkle oats for the goats so peacefully while her adorable kids kind of frolic. Her job is doing that. Like that. The role of money and how it drives that and makes that life very different than what any of us could accomplish. So can you talk a little specifically about that? Because I feel like we get it, but somehow why don't we still get it?
No, absolutely. And I think that that's really the power that we have to control how we feel when we're looking at these things. Advertising has been happening forever. Aspirational marketing has been happening forever on TV, in magazines. But those forms of media didn't live in the palm of our hand. Like they didn't come with us into the bathroom or into our beds. And so it's a lot more impactful. It's a lot more anxiety inducing. And we don't always realize that it's media, that it's created just like a magazine, because it's also mixed in with pictures of our friends and our family. And so we look at these as if we're looking at someone's real life. And that creates this expectation gap of what we feel like our real lives should look like. And when they're not living up to this unrealistic, fake, airbrushed expectation, that's where the anxiety comes in. And so I do think we all just have to remember, when we're looking at social media, and we all look at it too much, that we're looking at a magazine, we're watching commercials. This is media just like anything else. You are not glimpsing into someone's real world 85% of the time. And once we know that, I think we can just be more educated consumers of this content.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Can you be? I don't get served a ton of that, but like the woman living on the farm with the 6 kids, and everybody's wearing white all the time. Like I feel like this isn't tricking me, but I do enjoy looking at these pretty pictures. Is that okay? Is it like reading an issue of Vogue?
Totally okay. No, it's just like reading Vogue, right? Like, let yourself enjoy it as a leisure activity, but don't try to live up to it, is the thing. And these messages do lodge themselves into our brains. I think about that a lot because I know a lot of people that liked just scrolling through the Ballerina Farm brand.
Right.
And I call these, I try to be very careful when I talk about influencers. This is a brand. The Ballerina Farm is a brand. It is a multimedia company. And there's a woman who is in it, but we're not talking about her. We're talking about what the brand does. The brand makes decisions, just like Nike makes decisions.
Right.
And
just
a lot
like
of
Martha
people,
Stewart, right?
Like,
Martha Stewart is a brand. It's not a necessary person.
Yeah, she is a brand. And so, a lot of people love scrolling her feed. But then when she decided to squeeze herself into a dress 5 days after having a baby, it made a lot of people feel bad, because they're like, oh my gosh, this is not how I could function.
She competed in a beauty pageant.
She competed in a beauty pageant. Like
5 days after giving birth.
5 days after giving birth. And, that really hit a lot of people. A lot of people who were just enjoying the pretty pictures, but then they're like, oh my gosh, am I a failure because I haven't been able to compete in a beauty pageant right after giving birth? And that felt like an off message for a brand, right? Like, again, a sneaker company probably would be chastised for doing something like that, for, promoting unrealistic expectations of postpartum. So, even if you're just enjoying it, you can always be kind of gut punched when you're not expecting it.
Well, and I think just the perspective that these people are brands, because it feels sometimes like, well, wait, we're not allowed to attack other women. Women support women. It's not an attack. It's saying that. And the other thing that is very wrapped up in this, it's funny because my sister, who started very long ago interning and doing some reporting, I remember the first piece she ever wrote was about how beauty magazines basically are advertising the things they write about, right? Like that, this is just one big symbiotic system of like, your ugly skin is wrinkly and it's repelling men. Oh, here's an ad for wrinkle cream. Like just those relationships, and that those are also woven into these social media things. And you can very much critique the unreality without saying that, you're somehow personally attacking some woman online that we're not interested in.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's not a personal attack. It's media criticism is what it is. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like, calling out a media brand that has 7 million followers is not hating on a woman.
Mm. And what about our kids who are natives, who are growing up, being served this all the time, at least when they start using phones? Can we teach our children to be more gimlet-eyed consumers of this stuff? Is that hard to translate for them?
No, I don't think it's hard to translate at all. I think we just have to keep encouraging parents to have those conversations. We can't assume that they know it. And, I think media literacy should be taught in schools for kids starting in kindergarten. I've got a first grader, and I would love to see more media literacy taught to them. And I do it now in the early stage. My kids don't have phones, obviously, but I do it with YouTube. So we call YouTube Poop Tube in our house because everyone loves potty humor here.
Sure.
It's brand. It's a negative branding of
It's
a brand, right?
negative branding
You
of a
watch us
brand.
poop tube.
And that's exactly how my son says it. And we talk about, we're like, when you're with us, because they have access to their screens, right? To their iPads. I'm like, when you're with us, there's some cool stuff that we can find on the poop tube. Like, we love the Mark Rober videos, like the NASA guy who builds all this cool stuff. I'm like, but it's going to keep serving you things that are really like total crap. And that's why we call it Poop Tube. And so, like, that's the first social media platform that we have encountered together. And we're just very honest about it. And I think you have to do the same, especially with young girls on Instagram, because they are being served like diet content and body content. And like, it is very nefarious. And it's a conversation that we just cannot ignore as parents.
Jo's podcast is called Under the Influence. So many amazing episodes, Fitfluencers, genealogy influencers. There's so much fun information, but it's our favorite kind of podcast. You're kind of laughing and enjoying yourself, and you're learning something in every episode. And Jo, tell us where people can find the podcast. Well, now they know they can find it at catalystmedia.com, our company. And tell our audience where else they can find you and find the Sicilian Inheritance.
Yeah. So Under the Influence is everywhere that you get your podcasts. I'm on, this is so ironic, right? Because I'm like, where can you find me? You can find me on Instagram, the thing that I tear apart all the time, but it's true. I'm on Instagram as @Jo Piazza author, and the Sicilian Inheritance is literally everywhere you buy books. And when I go into bookstores and sign them these days, and I do that a lot. I was just at Barnes & Noble in Philly signing 40 copies. I hide a secret cannoli in one book per signing, a little drawing of a cannoli. And if you find the secret cannoli and you DM me on Instagram, I send you a weird Sicilian present.
Wow.
So
I know.
fun, people.
So fun.
Get out there and
I'm
start
off.
looking for cannolis.
Go look for the secret cannolis. Except the problem is my cannolis don't look like cannolis. So sometimes the booksellers are like, "What did you just draw in that book?
What is that?
What is that?"
From one Caltabolota nerd genealogy admirer to another. This is such a good book, even if you're not from Caltabolota or know somebody who is. It's great for book clubs. It's great for vacationing this summer, like you said, Margaret, and it will make you immediately want to go to Sicily. So, dream big.
Dream big. Jo, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thanks, Al.